Do you remember Medal of Honor? It was an extremely popular game franchise in the early 2000s that laid the groundwork for Call of Duty and its lasting reign on the FPS genre. A franchise that defined what a modern first-person shooter should look like, and then vanished, never to be seen again. Well, what happened to it? This is the story of how Medal of Honor went from one of the best FPS franchises of all time to being nearly forgotten. The first Medal of Honor game came out in 1999, but it wasn't developed by an experienced game studio like Activision, EA, or any of the other major AAA players. Instead, it was a passion project taken on by filmmaker Steven Spielberg. At the time, it was surprising for someone like Spielberg to take an interest in video games, as most of Hollywood looked down on the industry as a lesser art form. However, Spielberg had never agreed with Hollywood's elitism and saw the potential of the medium. In the 1980s, he had assisted in the development of Atari's E.T. game, and also with the writing for a game called The Dig in 1995. It went well, and throughout the rest of the 90s, he would continue to collaborate with studios like LucasArts and EA to build compelling narratives for their games. And with each title, his desire to create his own game only grew stronger. These little projects were fun, but Spielberg wanted to create a blockbuster title that would break down barriers in the industry and inspire developers everywhere. He had dipped his toes in the industry with these little projects, but he was a long way from being able to launch and fund his own game. The studios that he worked with respected and liked him, but that didn't mean that they would throw money at every single idea that he had. He was a talented and ambitious filmmaker, but he had little idea on how to bring his plans for a video game to life. But that would soon change. In 1994, Spielberg would take a break from filmmaking to create his own studio, co-founding an animation company called DreamWorks. DreamWorks wasn't meant to focus only on safe and profitable projects. The studio embraced the experimental and served as a way for Spielberg to do basically whatever he wanted to do, including video games. Although DreamWorks allowed for the creation of a game to be possible, there were still quite a few barriers. They were a young, untested studio, a film and animation studio, not a game developer. So while it attracted a wealth of talent, it didn't have the expertise required to develop an ambitious game. If Spielberg's vision was to get off the ground, he needed help. And in 1995, he finally caught the big break that he needed. DreamWorks and Microsoft partnered to create a joint game development studio called DreamWorks Interactive. Once DreamWorks Interactive was up and running, Spielberg quickly called a staff meeting to pitch his idea. He wanted to create the ultimate World War II first-person shooter, a game that would be equally educational, thrilling, and fun. But unfortunately, corporate executives were immediately skeptical. They thought World War II themed media was unpopular and that the project seemed too strange and unmarketable. Again, this was well before the days of impressive online war games like the sponsor of today's video, World of Warships. World of Warships is a game that I've played for a while now, and I love it. In this game, you command a massive naval fleet that spans 500 plus ships from over 10 different nations to battle other players on the high seas. And when I say 500 ships, I don't mean reskinned sloops. You can choose from battleships, aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers, you name it. I always like playing with the cruisers because they're more of a high damage support ship, and honestly, it fits my playstyle. The game has new content coming out every single month with things like new ships, in-game nations, cosmetics, or even entire ship classes. You can always count on new and exciting things to do in this game, and whether you play as a lone wolf or with friends, the game really fits every playstyle. And best of all, you can have all of this fun while being immersed into more than 40 maps with dynamic weather, stunning new water effects, and textures that make the seas look like the real deal. World of Warships is a must-play game, and you can play it today on PC and consoles by using my link in the description. If you sign up now, you can get 7 days of a premium account, 1,500,000 credits, 500 doubloons, and a free choice of a few really cool ships if you complete 15 battles. Thanks again to World of Warships for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to our conversation about Medal of Honor. Spielberg pushed back and convinced them to make the game anyways. His success and influence meant that he had the power to push the project through, despite their misgivings. In November of 1997, Medal of Honor entered a fast but brutal development cycle. And from the start, the game was a massive challenge due to a few different factors. For one, the project faced controversy during the latter half of its development. Active and former members of the military criticized the use of the Medal of Honor title, calling it disrespectful. They also felt the developers were trivializing the subject of World War II. While this criticism may seem bizarre today, at the time, video games were not yet seen as capable of telling serious stories. This was long before titles like The Last of Us, Red Dead Redemption, or BioShock Infinite. At this time, people were uncomfortable with games that appeared to celebrate violence. In response, the developers brought on Dale Dye, a military advisor, to critique and improve the game's portrayal of the military. He tore apart the initial demo, calling it irresponsible and in poor taste. However, he believed that with his help and a change in direction, they could create something truly amazing. Some of the more edgy and disturbing scenes were removed, shifting the focus away from shock value to an experience that respected the subject matter. And beyond the controversy, the game was demanding to the developers. Spielberg didn't just want to make a game, he wanted to create something that had never been done before. As with any of his movies, he wanted this game to shake up the industry. Because of these high expectations and constant changes, the studio was constantly losing people and money, and Medal of Honor was an extremely difficult project from the very beginning. The final months of development were bittersweet. The game had transformed into something truly special, but with all the money lost and controversy surrounding it, DreamWorks Interactive doubted that they would even make a profit. It seemed destined to be a brilliant experience, but a financial flop. In 1999, Medal of Honor was released, and it changed gaming forever. The shooter wasn't just good, it was better than anything else on the market. It swept up numerous awards, earning praise from gamers and critics alike. DreamWorks Interactive celebrated its unexpected success and got back to work. They developed 2 more games, Medal of Honor Underground and Allied Assault. Both were successful, expanding on and improving the foundations set by the first game. In an instant, Medal of Honor went from being a seemingly doomed franchise to the trailblazer that everyone was trying to imitate. When it came to gunplay, map design, graphics, and story, no other game even came close. The first Medal of Honor is still considered one of the best first-person shooters of all time, which makes the success of the sequels even more impressive. Following up on the first game seemed like an impossible task, yet they did it multiple times. And these titles started a golden age for World War II first-person shooter games, and almost every shooter was either blatantly copying or being inspired by Medal of Honor. Executives who had once been reluctant to commit to the World War II theme were now celebrating its success. But that dominance couldn't last forever. Spielberg never liked to stagnate for long. Medal of Honor Allied Assault was the last game that he directly worked on before selling the series to EA for an undisclosed sum. All of the titles that Spielberg worked on had been about creating new, immersive experiences, not just making money. But once the franchise was handed off to EA, things began to change. The drop in quality wasn't immediate, but it was noticeable. In the latter half of 2002, EA would release 2 DLC for Medal of Honor Allied Assault, Spearhead and Breakthrough. Spearhead was extremely short, laggy, and its story mostly retread old ground. Likewise, Breakthrough had forgettable missions that mostly had the player riding around, shooting at an enemy, or destroying artillery. The most interesting ideas were copied from the original game, and there was little improvement of the Medal of Honor formula. These expansion packs weren't terrible, but they definitely were some of the first Medal of Honor content that felt a bit dry and corporatized. The next year, EA would drop their next full game in the series, Medal of Honor Rising Sun. Fans were hopeful that it would be a step up from some of the last DLCs, but in the end, it suffered from the same issues, as well as some other, more glaring ones. It was clunky, the AI was horrible, with enemies watching the player take out their companions without noticing, the gunplay was mediocre, and the entire game just lacked the polish in level design and art direction of other FPS games, or even past Medal of Honor titles. With Medal of Honor Rising Sun, it became clear that what had once seemed like a low point in the series was now becoming a trend. EA was more interested in pumping out profitable yearly sequels than in making good games. Where Medal of Honor had once been at the forefront of new ideas, the series had become shockingly repetitive. Fans grew bored and frustrated as the sequels turned into cash-grabbing slogs. Despite this, it was hard to imagine Medal of Honor being dethroned. It was the original World War II first-person shooter. I mean, how could it possibly fall? Well, you don't have to look far to understand what happened. In 2003, a new franchise arose that, like Medal of Honor, would change gaming forever. A studio called Infinity Ward was developing a new game, Call of Duty. Fittingly, it was another World War II FPS inspired by Medal of Honor. But unlike the other clones that had come out before, Call of Duty had staying power. Upon its release, it received endless praise and easily won the FPS of the year. The gunplay, missions, and sound design were all hailed as superior to everything else available at that time. Call of Duty effortlessly made other games look outdated, and most importantly, it completely revolutionized multiplayer FPS games. The game had these standard deathmatch modes found in other titles, but it also introduced other game modes like Behind Enemy Lines, Search and Destroy, and Retrieval. And beyond new game modes, Call of Duty also added many small touches that improved the entire experience. A big example was the implementation of a kill cam that shows you the person who defeated you. Nowadays, pretty much every FPS has that, but at the time, COD was a trailblazer. Call of Duty's expansive multiplayer features would become one of the biggest reasons for its explosive rise. A strong multiplayer mode gave the game near infinite replay value, and as the player base grew larger and larger, more people wanted to play with their friends. There's always a place for good single-player games, but when it comes to a first-person shooter, it's very difficult to compete without a robust multiplayer experience. This proved to be a big challenge for Medal of Honor, as the franchise had always centered on its grounded single-player experience, and the multiplayer was a bonus and wasn't fleshed out like it was in Call of Duty. Medal of Honor continued to release sequels, maintaining its dominance over the FPS genre. However, it was clear that the distance between Medal of Honor and Call of Duty was shrinking with each sequel. In 2005, Medal of Honor released European Assault, a game that was a step up from the last 3 entries in the series, but still behind the curve. Overall, the game was a return to form, and it was much better than Medal of Honor Rising Sun, but it wasn't groundbreaking enough to put it at COD's level, and the multiplayer was still underwhelming. Meanwhile, Call of Duty 2 expanded on the first game, with another solid campaign and gameplay that critics were calling the best that the FPS genre had to offer. Call of Duty was getting better, while Medal of Honor was stagnating. While the war between these franchises was heating up, another franchise, Battlefield, was also rising, breathing another burst of life into the FPS genre. The Battlefield games had fairly standard campaigns, but like the Call of Duty series, they truly shined in their multiplayer experience with 16 maps and 5 classes, giving players a ton of content to dive into with their friends. With each title, the franchise would expand upon the available guns, modes, and maps. Battlefield pretty much always played second fiddle to COD, but it was still pushing the genre forward, as well as being another series that was outdoing Medal of Honor on nearly every level in terms of innovation. When Medal of Honor was first released, no one else was making World War II shooters. On one hand, that made the games risky, as there was a chance that no one would be interested in their topics. But at the same time, it also meant that there was no real competition. The better that games like COD and Battlefield got, the harder it was for Medal of Honor to stand out. If players wanted to play World War II shooters, they now had other options. Options that were rapidly becoming better and flashier than the yearly Medal of Honor sequels. And in 2007, the battle between Medal of Honor and COD finally ended. That year, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was released, and it ushered in a new era of gaming. Modern Warfare popularized core mechanics now expected in modern shooters, from perks to kill streaks. It also featured a highly developed campaign with a compelling story and enjoyable missions. By comparison, around this same time, Medal of Honor released 3 games: Airborne, Vanguard, and Heroes 2, all of which were seen as mediocre at best and disappointing at worst. In a year when Call of Duty was hailed as revolutionary, Medal of Honor faltered. If the two franchises had once been neck and neck, Modern Warfare was the blow that made it clear which series would be the future of shooters. After that point, Medal of Honor would never again catch up to Call of Duty. For the next few years, Medal of Honor continued to fall into irrelevancy. EA realized that they were losing their grip on the FPS market and that they needed to breathe new life into the series. So they began planning a new Medal of Honor game, one that would remind fans what they loved about the original trilogy. Rather than continuing with yearly releases, they went quiet for 3 years. And in 2010, Medal of Honor returned with an entire soft reboot of the franchise. This 2010 release was a modern FPS set in Afghanistan, going back to the basics. While many fans appreciated the return to form, most found the game solid, but not groundbreaking. In many ways, the game felt behind the times. Enemies still shot from one direction, the level design was outdated, the game struggled to guide players from one sequence to another, leading to a lot of wondering, and the story felt like a tired trope. They did do a good job at telling a grounded story that explored a real conflict, but the world building was let down by the gameplay and lack of depth in the writing. Medal of Honor 2010 showed potential, but it wasn't the revolutionary comeback that fans had hoped for. And of course, this small victory was overshadowed by the release of Call of Duty Black Ops, which became the best-selling Call of Duty game to date. What little momentum EA had was killed for good by the sequel to this reboot, Medal of Honor Warfighter, which released in 2012. Warfighter fell into all of the worst trappings of modern games. It was buggy, unfinished, and boring. At this time, Medal of Honor was already surviving primarily on nostalgia, and Warfighter was a slap in the face to longtime fans. The combination of backlash, a lack of direction, and the fact that the series was now nearly a decade removed from any real popularity led EA to quietly retire the franchise. In fact, there was never even an official announcement. They just stopped making games. Aside from a brief VR spin-off in 2020, Medal of Honor has since gone silent. And the downfall of this series is a true tragedy. For most of the franchise's life, the games had been uninspired cash grabs, but that's not how they started. Medal of Honor began with Spielberg's desire to create something innovative and powerful. It was a passion project, never intended to make a profit or spawn sequels. However, once the franchise was handed to EA, its decline was inevitable. After releasing one forgettable game after another, it took the introduction of a new series ready to take the FPS genre in fresh directions for Medal of Honor to truly become a relic of the past. Did you ever play any of the old Medal of Honor games? I always loved Rising Sun as a kid, but now that I'm older, I see that it doesn't quite hold up. Were any of these games ever any good, or were they all kind of mediocre from the start? Let me know your thoughts on the situation in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.